Welcome to today's custom deep dive. Today we're tracking down a botanical ghost for you.
Yeah, a real phantom of the plant world. It's
It
fascinating.
really is. We are looking at a small, highly exclusive family of plants that frankly hid from modern science for decades. They managed to survive some of the absolute harshest, most punishing deserts in the Neotropics.
And they do it with a lot of style.
Right, and they produce this specialized fruit, literally known as snake eyes.
Such a wild, highly descriptive common name.
It's perfectly accurate, though, as we'll see. We have a fantastic stack of source material today to help us map all of this out for you. We are drawing from the Flora of North America, a massive Andean forest ecology study by Blundo and colleagues, and some foundational, really granular wood anatomy research by the botanist Sherwin Carlquist.
That Carlquist paper from the year 2000 is an absolute classic in botanical circles.
Oh, for sure. So our mission today is to unpack this resilient, rebellious, and honestly kind of spooky plant family known as the Achatocarpaceae. Let's get right into it.
It is a remarkable group to study. I mean, the Achatocarpaceae family is entirely restricted to the Neotropics. We are talking about a very tight taxonomic cluster here.
Very tight, just two generatia.
Exactly, Photocarpus and Phalathemnus. And there are somewhere between 11 to maybe 16 species in total, depending on how you classify them.
Which is tiny.
Oh, yeah. When you juxtapose that against the massive, sprawling plant families that dominate the Americas, like the bean family or the sunflower family, they are barely a blip on the radar.
Barely a blip. But their evolutionary strategy is what makes them so compelling to look at.
Right. Because for a very long time, the wider botanical community didn't even recognize them as an independent family.
Which seems crazy now.
It does. They were effectively lumped into the Phytolaccaceae family.
Okay, let's unpack this for you listening. The Phytolaccaceae is the pokeweed family, which most of you are likely familiar with if you've spent any time in a garden or near a forest edge in North America.
Right, the loud weeds.
Exactly. Pokeweeds are notoriously loud, aggressive, weedy plants.
Yeah.
They have those practically neon magenta stems.
And those heavy, drooping clusters of dark purple berries.
They are ubiquitous. Visually, they are unmistakable.
Yeah.
And for decades, the assumption was that our highly specialized, heavily armored little desert shrubs were simply a morphological outlier of that pokeweed family.
Which is a huge assumption to make just based on a few superficial flower characteristics.
Right. It took a mountain of microscopic and chemical evidence to finally grant the Achatocarpaceae their taxonomic independence.
And one of the most compelling pieces of that puzzle was actually an absence rather than a presence of a specific chemical marker.
And missing colors.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is the complete metabolic block we see in the Achatocarpaceae regarding pigmentation.
Let's break that down.
Sure. So plants in the broader order Caryophyllaceae typically rely on betulins or anthocyanins to synthesize their colors. They're reds and purples and blues.
Which is why pokeweed is absolutely saturated with those compounds.
Hence the glowing magenta stems and dark berries. But the Achatocarpaceae completely lack the biochemical pathways to produce either betulins or anthocyanins.
They just can't make them.
Fundamentally incapable. They cannot synthesize those complex, flashy pigments at all. It is a highly conserved trait across all their species.
And that chemical absence was one of the first major red flags that they belonged on an entirely different evolutionary branch.
Right, it was a massive clue. But the structural divergence is even more pronounced when you look at the actual cellular architecture.
Which is where Carlquist's paper on their wood and bark anatomy becomes so critical to this story.
Absolutely. Carlquist utilized a highly comparative approach. He put the physical wood of these specific plants under scanning electron microscopes.
Imagine being Carlquist slicing these incredibly hard, dry desert woods to look at the microscopic plumbing.
It's painstaking work, and what he found was definitive. He documented that Achatocarpaceae possess minute vessel pits in their xylem.
Okay, so the xylem is the tissue moving water up from the roots.
Right, and the pits are these microscopic valves governing the water flow between the individual cells.
And in our desert shrubs, these valves are structurally distinct and uniquely tiny compared to anything you would ever find in the pokeweed family.
But furthermore, they operate with a single cambium.
Which is a huge structural difference because pokeweeds utilize successive cambia.
Exactly. Pokeweeds lay down multiple concentric rings of actively dividing tissue to quickly build a thick, fleshy stem.
But our desert shrubs abandoned that messy strategy entirely. They went for a more streamlined, singular cambium layer. It builds dense, hard, reliable wood.
So the internal plumbing is totally different. And then the reproductive morphology isolates them even further.
Right. Let's talk about how they reproduce.
We're looking at a strictly dioecious family.
Meaning you have distinct, separate male and female plants.
Yes, each playing a highly specialized ecological role. You don't have both reproductive organs on the same flower. The female plants feature unilocular ovaries housing just a single ovule.
A single seed waiting to happen.
Right. And when it comes to that seed development, they produce true fleshy berries, but they completely lack true endosperm.
Which is the standard starchy nutrient reserve found inside most normal angiosperm seeds.
Exactly. So when you synthesize the lack of pigments, the single cambium, the minute vessel pits, and this highly distinct reproductive strategy, the evidence is just overwhelming.
You can't ignore it. They are a monophyletic group operating on a completely separate evolutionary trajectory from pokeweeds.
And that profound structural isolation perfectly mirrors their physical appearance in the wild.
Oh, absolutely. These are incredibly tough spinescent shrubs. They are heavily armed with thorns across their branches.
And their leaves. The simple fleshy leaves exhibit this bizarre, almost gothic characteristic.
Yes, the black foliage. Upon desiccation, rather than senescing into a typical brown or yellow like most leaves, the foliage turns completely pitch black.
It creates a very stark, aggressive silhouette against the desert landscape.
It really does. And that brings us to the sole species within the Phallothamnus genus. This is where the family's distinct morphology really peaks.
Phallothamnus spinescens.
Yeah.
It is a branching, heavily armed shrub endemic to the harsh brushlands of southern Texas and northern Mexico. It pushes all the way down through Sonora, Sinaloa, and Baja California.
It rarely exceeds 250 centimeters in height, so it's not a towering tree.
No, but it is a dominant, imposing presence in those localized scrub environments.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. Because of its highly unique appearance, Phallothamnus spinescens has picked up several really evocative common names over the years.
The local taxonomy is always colorful.
Always. Some regional texts refer to it as Pucha. But the two names that really capture its true nature are the devil queen and snake eyes.
Snake eyes.
Yeah, snake eyes. And that latter one isn't just a fun local colloquialism. It is a highly accurate literal description of the plant's fruiting morphology.
The snake eye berry is an absolute masterclass in evolutionary workarounds.
It is brilliant, and it stems directly from that chemical absence we discussed earlier, the lack of pigments.
Right. Typical frugivorous birds, the ones plants rely on to eat their fruit and disperse their seeds, are highly attuned to the UV spectrum.
They actively scan the canopy for high-contrast colors, like bright red or deep purple.
Exactly. That visual pop signals that a fruit is ripe and packed with nutrients.
But the devil queen is chemically incapable of producing those flashy red and purple pigments.
So it had to evolve a completely different mechanism to create that vital visual contrast.
And what it came up with is wild. Phallothamnus spinescens produces a spherical, highly juicy berry. But the pericarp, the outer skin and the flesh, is entirely translucent.
It presents as a pale, watery white or a very faint, watery green.
Almost like glass.
Yeah.
And sitting right in the center of that clear, watery matrix is a single, hard, jet black seed.
Partially wrapped in a small aril.
Because the flesh of the berry is essentially a clear window, that shiny black seed is completely visible from the outside.
The visual effect is startling. It is exactly like looking at the dark pupil of a reptile staring out from a pale, translucent eyeball.
Literally snake eyes. Picture a bird flying over the dry Texas scrub, seeing these creepy little eyeballs staring up from the thorny branches.
It is an incredibly effective strategy.
It has to be.
Right. Oh, absolutely. From an ecological perspective, creating extreme contrast without paying the high energetic cost of synthesizing complex betalains or anthocyanins is brilliant.
Especially in the harsh, highly reflective glare of the Chihuahuan and Sonoran desert light. That jet black pupil set against the translucent flesh creates a very sharp visual target.
The plant achieves the exact same functional goal of avian seed dispersal without utilizing the standard botanical toolkit.
It is a perfect example of convergent ecological function achieved through a highly divergent morphological pathway.
You really have to wonder how a plant built with such stark, stripped-down efficiency fares across broader geographical ranges.
We know the devil queen handles the extreme heat of Texas and Mexico just fine. But the Achatocarpaceae family extends all the way down through the Neotropics into central Chile and Argentina.
And that wide distribution maps perfectly onto the massive ecological survey conducted by Blindo and his team.
Yes, the study published in the Journal of Tropical Ecology. This is an amazing piece of field work.
They set out to map the altitudinal and latitudinal distribution of tree species across the highly complex, varied topography of the Andes.
The sheer scale of the Blundo study is staggering.
It provides vital context for just how resilient the Achatocarpaceae are in the wild. The research team established 47 distinct 1-hectare plots.
Think about hiking through the Andes to rope off and study 47 different patches of forest, spanning 25,000 square kilometers in northwestern Argentina.
Importantly, these plots covered an altitudinal gradient of 2,000 meters.
So we're surveying everything from the hot, baking, dry lowlands all the way up into the dense, saturated upper montane cloud forests.
Across those 47 hectares, they individually mapped, measured, and taxonomically identified 22,240 trees.
Every single tree with a diameter of 10 centimeters or greater. It is a foundational data set for understanding neotropical forest composition.
And deeply embedded in that massive data set of over 22,000 trees is a crucial species from our taxonomic group.
Achatocarpaceae precox.
Yes. Across a 2,000-meter mountain gradient, you naturally have an incredible variety of microclimates. The high-altitude cloud forests are lush, incredibly wet.
They harbor a massive density of diverse broadleafed species, all competing for a tiny sliver of canopy space.
But Achatocarpaceae precox wasn't up there competing in the clouds.
No, the researchers found it completely dominating the absolute lowest, hottest, and driest plots in the entire survey,
Specifically the Chaco Forest region.
sitting at an elevation of just 300 to 400 meters.
In just the 3 1-hectare plots mapped within the Chaco scrub, the team recorded 200 individual Achatocarpaceae precox trees.
To understand why a species would hyperlocalize and totally dominate in that specific harsh basin, you have to look at the environmental pressures of the Chaco forest,
The researchers utilized a specific metric called moisture stress.
which calculates the brutal intersection of low annual precipitation and sustained extreme high temperatures.
And the Chaco forest is characterized by profound, punishing moisture stress.
During the dry season, right before the rains finally break, ambient temperatures down there can sustain at 40 degrees Celsius,
Around 104 degrees Fahrenheit, just baking heat.
and the soil moisture drops to functionally zero.
Most of the species thriving in the lush montane forests higher up the gradient would suffer catastrophic vascular failure in the Chaco.
The physics of a plant trying to survive those conditions are just brutal. In 104-degree heat, the evaporative demand on a plant's leaves is immense.
As water transpires out of the leaf tissue into the dry air, it creates negative pressure.
Literally pulling water up the xylem pipes from the roots like a straw.
And if the soil is bone dry, that tension inside the plant's plumbing becomes so extreme that the water column can literally snap.
It's basically like trying to suck water through a crushed straw when the cup's already empty. The physics just break.
Exactly. It creates an air bubble or a cavitation, which permanently blocks the vessel and can quickly kill the whole plant.
This is where the ecological mapping of the Blundo study perfectly intersects with the microscopic anatomy we talked about from the Carlquist paper.
Precisely. Carlquist's anatomical data provides the mechanical cellular explanation for the Blundo study's ecological distribution.
Carlquist quantified the efficiency and safety of a plant's xylem using what he called the mesomorphy ratio.
Right. The calculation multiplies the diameter of the vessel by the length of the vessel element.
And then it divides that product by the number of vessels per square millimeter.
A high mesomorphy ratio indicates a plant adapted to abundant, plentiful water.
It builds wide, long pipes to move massive volumes of water quickly, like a fire hose.
Which is highly efficient when it's raining, but incredibly vulnerable to cavitation if the water supply suddenly drops.
A low mesomorphy ratio, on the other hand, indicates a vascular system built for extreme drought and high tension,
It means the plant is building incredibly narrow, short vessels.
and packing them densely together.
It moves water much slower, but the water columns are structurally reinforced against snapping under the immense negative pressure of a 104-degree dry season.
And when Carlquist calculated the mesomorphy ratios for the Achatocarpaceae, the numbers were definitive.
Phyllothamnus spinescens, the double queen out in the Texas brush, scored a remarkably low 21.
21. That is the exact internal vascular architecture of a highly specialized extreme desert xerophyte.
It is structurally engineered at a cellular level to safeguard every drop of water under massive environmental tension.
And the Achatocarpaceae species surveyed by Carlquist scored between 59 and 99.
As he noted, those values align perfectly with the deeply sclerophyllous woody brush adapted to the prolonged dry spells of coastal chaparral environments.
Their highly restricted internal plumbing is the exact reason Achatocarpus precox can act as a dominant canopy species in the Chaco forest, while all the other fancy broadleaf trees retreat up the mountainside to the safety of the wet cloud forest. They don't just tolerate the moisture stress in the Chaco.
No, their minute vessel pits and low mesomorphy ratios mean their entire physiology is built to capitalize on an environment that is lethal to their competitors.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Why should you care about this obscure, thorny plant family?
Well, we have a plant family defined by its complete lack of standard botanical pigments,
Operating with these streamlined single cambium
producing translucent, spooky snake-eye berries.
and dominating the absolute most moisture-stressed forests in the Neotropics.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Achatocarpaceae represent a total masterclass in the evolutionary power of reduction.
For decades, they were overlooked as a strange, weird offshoot of the pokeweed family.
Largely because they didn't present the highly visible, easily categorized traits that botanists were conditioned to look for.
They were quite literally hiding behind what they lacked.
But when you strip away the assumptions and look at the actual cellular physics and the hard ecological data, you realize the truth.
They are one of the most highly optimized survival machines in the Americas.
It is the ultimate rugged survivalist approach to botany.
If you are venturing into a hostile 104-degree environment with zero rainfall, you don't waste precious metabolic energy producing massive water-heavy fruits.
Or synthesizing complex, flashy purple pigments just to get a bird's attention.
Every single adaptation in this family is about shedding the unnecessary to focus entirely on extreme resilience.
They build thick, thorny spinescent armor to protect what little they have.
They engineer microscopic drought-proof plumbing that won't snap under pressure.
And they use the simple optical geometry of a black seed and a clear berry to handle reproduction without the huge chemical overhead.
It is a pure, unadulterated triumph of ecological function over aesthetic form.
It really forces us to reevaluate how we measure evolutionary success out in the wild.
We so often equate complexity and biological loudness, like those neon magenta stems of the pokeweed, with advanced adaptation.
But the Achatocarpaceae prove that sometimes the most advanced evolutionary move you can make is extreme metabolic discipline.
They survive by being stubbornly, quietly efficient.
Let's do a quick distillation of the incredible territory we've covered today.
We started with a taxonomic ghost, a plant family miscategorized for decades due to a superficial resemblance to common backyard weeds.
Through the precise, incredibly tedious wood anatomy work of Carlquist, we explored how a lack of pigments and a unique single-cambium xylem architecture set them apart.
We ventured into the Sonoran and Chihuahuan brush to examine the Devil Queen's brilliant, pigment-free snake-eye berry.
And finally, using Blendo's massive dataset of 22,000 trees, we saw exactly how that highly specialized cellular plumbing allows these plants to dominate the extreme moisture stress of the Chaco forests,
Thriving completely where other species failed.
It is an incredibly cohesive narrative of environmental adaptation.
But this raises an important question. Something for you to ponder that pushes beyond the historical data of these two specific studies.
We've established that the Achatocarpaceae stripped away standard botanical features to build an ultra-efficient, highly stress-tolerant vascular system.
They survived by becoming botanical minimalists.
Exactly. And as we look at the rapidly shifting climate of the Neotropics, where moisture stress is becoming more prolonged and extreme temperature events are the new baseline, it totally shifts our perspective on survivability.
We expend a massive amount of conservation energy worrying about the highly complex, highly specialized species up in the fragile cloud forests.
But as those environments dry out, it is highly likely that these stripped-down, armored, metabolically disciplined plants will take over. The ones hiding in the scrub with low mesomorphy ratios and no flashy pigments.
And they will be the ones that ultimately inherit the landscape.
It makes you wonder if the simplest organisms we've been largely ignoring are actually the ones holding the blueprint for surviving the next century.
That is a staggering way to look at the future of these ecosystems. The very traits that made them invisible to science for so long might be the exact traits that outlast everything else on the mountain.
Absolutely.
Next time you encounter a scrubby armored bush surviving in an impossibly harsh landscape, recognize that you might be looking at a highly tuned evolutionary vanguard. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Stay curious out there.
Keep looking closely at the invisible mechanisms of the world around you, and we will catch you on the next one.